And I'll start my recording. Give that a second. Okay, so again, thanks for joining me. And Equity Real Estate for your training. I want to do a shout out to Academy Mortgage again for sponsoring us here. Academy is a fantastic mortgage lender. I think one of the top in the nation, if not the top in the nation, as far as home buyers goes. They do a great job for us, and they've been a really good partner for us, and they help bring this training to you for free. So look up your local Academy office and talk to them. And let's do a quick homework review. Last week we talked about the real estate purchase contract. Hopefully that was a good eye-opening experience for a lot of us, and we realized how important our studies are. I just got an eye-opener this morning. I had a real estate agent email me saying she just read about the new form and what should she do about it. Now, I hadn't read about the new form yet. I've got the magazine sitting right here on my desk, and so I pulled it open and I had to do a quick study. So this applies to everybody, including myself. Make general study a daily priority for you, okay? All right. Today we're going to be talking about time management and a concept I call our ideal week. Now, when we talk about time management, I think it's very important to realize, what is your time worth? Now, this is something, I think this little graph here that I put together, the first time I saw it, and I've adjusted it a little bit, but the first time that I saw it, it was fascinating to me. I found myself on here, I think at the time I was earning around $50,000 a year, the first time I saw this graph. And I realized that every hour I was making about $24 an hour. Now, actually, the first time that I saw this, I was working instead of this is based, by the way, off of a 40-hour work week, 52 weeks in the year, however many weeks there are in the year. I think it's 52. I've had a cold all week, so my brain totally is not functioning normally. But anyways, it's based off of no holiday time. Let's put it that way, 40 hours a week. Now, when I read this, I was working 80 hours a week and earning about $50,000 a year. And so instead of $24 an hour, I was making about $12 an hour, which just happened to be a little bit less than most of the people I was supervising. But since I was a manager, they could pay me a salary and get away with it. I say get away with it. I was grateful for the job. It was a good job for me. They weren't pulling anything over my eyes when I took the job. But every minute that I worked was worth 40 cents, okay? Now, in real estate, when I first started taking real estate seriously, you guys have heard my story in the past, I went to the seminar, I heard the advice that that I'll never forget unless I'm trying to share it with you in training. Work when you're working and play when you're playing. And the other bit of advice was learn to make business decisions, not emotional decisions. Those two bits of advice that I got from this seminar that I went to have stuck with me over the years. It's been over a decade now, but they've changed my life. The first year that I really went to work and implemented that, I increased my income to just barely under $100,000. The first time I'd ever gotten close to that, and you know, looking at that's almost $50 an hour. Now, this is the interesting thing to me over here. In a year, 1 hour a day is worth $12,500. Now, just to put that in perspective, the question that I ask agents is, when you examine your daily activities, can you clearly identify, easily identify, an hour a day that is lost time, that isn't very productive? And I'm talking about your workday, okay? We could all examine 24 hours and say, well, I could wake up another hour earlier. And out of all the agents that I've talked to, there's only one that comes to mind that wouldn't readily answer and say easily, I can identify an hour a day. The one agent that comes to mind, she was a full-time student and did full-time real estate as well. And man, I looked at her schedule and I couldn't find an hour in there to save my life. But for most of us, if we're real honest with ourselves, we can identify an hour a day. And that 1 hour a day, if it's wasted time on whether it's YouTube or Facebook or who knows what it is, you know, there's lots of reasons that we may not be as productive as we could be. that's worth $12,500. Now, you could apply this to a salaried position, not just real estate. You know, one of our office buildings in Clearfield has a whole bunch of glass windows, so everywhere you walk through, you see all the secretaries, and you see right through into their office space, basically. And probably at least half the time, the secretaries are just waiting for a task to come their way. They're usually playing solitaire or they're on Facebook or something like that. So for most people, they could easily identify 1 hour a day that they waste. For us, because we create our own job, that calculates into real money for us. So if you're used to making $100,000 a year, and you could find 1 hour a day that was not productive, you could give yourself a $12,500 a year raise. And that's substantial. I mean, you're talking a new car. It's not a fancy car, but you could get a new car for that price. The other thing that I want to point out to you with this graph is the millionaires. Now, millionaires are very picky with their time, what they spend their time on. They're very selective. They have gatekeepers that block people from coming in and wasting their time. But they realize that every hour is worth nearly $500 to them. 1 hour a day to them is $125,000 a year. So just amazing. And what I really want to accomplish with this graph here is I want you to find yourself. Where are you at right now with your income, with real estate? And there's two things that I want to accomplish with this chart. First of all, if you have a part-time job or you're tempted to leave real estate and get a part-time job, I hope this graph would discourage that from happening. Most people that come to me saying, oh, my wife's getting on my case and I need to go get a real job, that's how they always phrase it. I'll sit down with them with something like this and say, how much is your real job going to pay you? And they'll tell me how much it is, and it's usually more around the $30,000 a year range. So it's around $14 an hour. And I say, how many hours do you work in real estate? And they'll tell me, and it's usually some pitiful amount on a daily basis, but they haven't structured their day. And so they're working 3 or 4 hours of real honest real estate work a day, and they're making around the same amount. And I think they're cheating themselves. I think that they need to turn real estate into their real job, because if they took that 3 or 4 hours that they were making 30 and they made that 8 solid hours of real estate work a day, I think they'd be up around $75,000 to $100,000 easily without even improving their skills. Okay, that would just be being honest with your day's work to your real estate job. So that's the first thing that I want this to accomplish is to remove the temptation to go find a different job, because I think real estate is a fantastic career. The second thing that I want to accomplish with this is I want to help you respect your time better. So if you are worth $100,000 a year, if that's your income, or your goal income, even if you're not making this, if your goal is that, you need to start thinking as if that were what you were worth. And this changed things for me when I started thinking this way. It honestly did change things. What happened was when title companies would call me and ask me out to lunch, which happens quite frequently for us in real estate sometimes. Title companies, lenders, we get catered to a lot, it seems like. And I realized, I started keeping track of, these lunches never go less than an hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours, and they're a lot of fun, and the people pay for my lunch, and that's nifty. But that lunch, even though I'm not paying for it, it costs me nearly $100 every time I go out there and waste my time. And so it makes me rethink how I spend time. I want to be a little bit more selective with how I spend it, where I spend it, because I realize that even if something is free, it's not. A golfing outing during the middle of my prospecting hours. Yeah, we're self-employed. We can go golfing whenever we want. But if that golf trip costs me, if it's a 3-hour trip, and it costs me, what, $150 besides the actual cost of golfing, that's going to make me think twice about it. Maybe I can reschedule it for a Saturday or for maybe an evening time or something different. But, and maybe I won't. Maybe that's my priority, to go golfing with my friends. But now I understand the true cost. So I hope that my second goal again is that you guys understand the value of your time and how much your time is worth. Okay, now I want to put this into a real world scenario for you. Okay, real world. How many of you guys, by raise of hands, remember your first job? Click the little button on the dashboard panel. You remember your first job and the first time that you got a raise. Okay? For anybody out there, was their raise like mine? I'm going to go ahead and lower the hands. My first raise, I remember clearly, it was 25 cents. All right? And I'd worked really hard at this job. I was a dishwasher up at a university restaurant. And I'd worked really hard, and I got a 25-cent per hour raise. And I was so proud of that. Raised home, told my folks. I was, 16. It wasn't my first, I used to mow lawns and stuff, but my first job working for somebody else, I got a 25-cent per hour raise, and that thrilled me. Fast forward a little bit and give you a different example of the quote-unquote real world. My father was raised, and his heart was in farming. He was a teacher, but he was raised on a farm. He loved open spaces, loved working with a farm, loved having a lot of land, and we had that in Malad, Idaho. Yay, go Malad. But we were surrounded by a lot of land. We had some land of our own. We had a couple cows, and we had, it seems like, one of every kind of animal there for a while. And in order for him to get a raise, now note, this is a $5,000 a year raise, okay, for a teacher. He uprooted the family, moved to the big city of Logan, Utah, and sold the house there, got a little bit smaller house in Logan, cut the size of his land in about a third, and was surrounded by neighbors on all sides, which drove him crazy. And he did all of that so that he could also work and go to school full-time for 2 years to get a master's degree, which of course increased our debt. He did all of that to get a $5,000 a year raise. And that story is kind of a typical story for what it takes for people, again, with these quote-unquote real jobs. You want a big raise? Fine. There's some real difficult things that you're going to have to do. Now, let's talk about real estate. You want to give yourself a raise in real estate. Let's say that you have one transaction a month, $150,000 deal on average. You make $4,500. You work 40 hours a week times 4 weeks in the month. That's 160 hours, and so you're making about $28 an hour. Now, again, if in the real world I got a raise, it would maybe go from $28 to $29 an hour, right? I might get $1 here, 50 cents there, something like that. But the raises typically are not very substantial. If I want something that's a little bit more substantial, or at least looks substantial, then I have to make big sacrifices like my father did. You know, going back to school, a couple more years of education, something like that. And that equated to a $5,000 a year raise, not a month raise, $5,000 a year raise for a teacher. Now let's look at what it takes for real estate. And this is, by the way, kind of my story. All right? My first year that I really took real estate serious, I could do a transaction a month fairly easily. Actually, when I took this training that I'm going to give you guys today seriously, I had kind of hit my max. Okay, I was operating at about 2 transactions a month, but I was frazzled. I was running like crazy. I was 60, 70 hours a week. I didn't really enjoy the life. I had good money, but I didn't really enjoy the life because I was away from my family, and I had some young kids at the time, still do. But it wasn't really what I wanted. And so I decided to put today's training into practice. And I'll share with you what happened to me. But basically, this scenario I'm going to give you is a real-life scenario. Okay, so let's say you want to give yourself a raise. This is how it works in real estate. We don't give ourselves a $1 an hour raise. We don't have to go back to school and incur a whole bunch of extra debt. All we do is become more efficient and effective. I can go from 1 transaction a month to 2 transactions a month, doubling my money. Now that's nearly a $5,000 a month raise, not a year raise. And I can do that without changing my number of hours worked. Now, hopefully nobody out there is thinking, wait a second, How can that be possible? We all know agents that close easy 2 deals a month, and they're not working more than 40 hours a week, right? We all know agents that are like that. So basically they give themselves a $56 or a $28 an hour raise to a $56 an hour job. And guys, when you compare this with, again, that quote-unquote real world, this blows it out of the water. This kind of potential isn't anywhere out there. And the kind of sacrifices that people would make to have a job like this are astounding. Going back to school, increasing their debt, taking on additional responsibilities, taking a salaried position where they actually double their hours worked to get a raise like this, where effectively their dollars per hour stays the same because now they're working 80 hours a week in a salaried position. They're just making more money, but they have no time to enjoy it. Guys, we have something phenomenal here that we have our hands on in this real estate business. And becoming an expert at this job, hopefully you guys are, after today's training, you'll be willing to make some of the required sacrifices to be the best at this, because the potential upside is phenomenal. You guys have heard that, I think it's a Shakespeare quote, "Whoever thou art, act well thy part." Years ago, some of my agents went to a seminar, and they came out all hyped up. And this is a fairly common seminar, so you guys have probably heard the same argument. But they came out all hyped up because in the seminar, the guy had told them, the speaker, had told them that real estate agents could make as much money as doctors and lawyers. And of course, that's true. And he said, however, think of how ludicrous it is for you to go to your doctor and say, all right, I need this surgery. Tell you what, you give it to me for half off and I'll go ahead and go with you. And the seminar speaker would say, isn't that a crazy notion? You would never dream of doing that to your doctor, and yet people do that to us as real estate professionals all the time. Don't let it happen. Don't discount your commissions. You don't need to. You're better than that. And these two agents came out of this training, and they told me all about it, and I'd been to seminars like that before, so I understood where they were coming from. They told me all about it, and they're like, yeah, this is us. We deserve better. And they went out and basically demanded it, and they were out of business within a year. And so the question that I have for you, nothing that they said is false. We can make as much as doctors and lawyers. You don't have to discount your commissions. But the problem was, they weren't being treated like a professional. How do we get others to treat us professionally? That's the real question. Okay? And the answer, again, I think it's in that little quote, "Whoever thou art, act well thy part." If you want to be a professional, if you want others to treat you professionally, you have to act professionally. Let's talk about this. This is that quote that I was telling you guys about that I pulled from that seminar. Changed my life. Work when you're working and play when you're playing. What we're going to talk about today with time management are some systems to help you manage yourself. All right? Some of you guys will recognize some of these themes that we're going to talk about. They are familiar in different self-development books. I've tailored them a little bit to real estate. Hopefully this helps you out. The truth is here with this question, we don't manage time. We manage ourselves. And most of the time we do so very poorly. Okay? Time will go on without us, whether we're taking a nap or whether we're working hard or we're eating lunch or whatever. Time will just plod on. The billionaire whose hourly rate is, several $1,000s an hour, his time is the same as the guy sitting on the corner with a brown paper bag and a sign up saying, "We'll work for food." They all have the same 24 hours a day. The question is the difference is how they manage themselves. So let's talk about this a little bit. There are a lot of things that cause system malfunctions, okay? Especially in real estate. There are time-consuming activities and clients. Have you ever had that one client that you felt like was a 40-hour week all by themselves? The ones that call you all the time, and when they do, they talk. We've had those guys. There are some time-consuming activities in this business. There's trouble with family and friends adjusting to the idea of self-employment. It's always a little bit of a challenge especially when you work from home, like most of us do. There's always a little bit of a challenge with people not respecting your time or seeing you as a professional, because it's so easy for your spouse to come and say, hey, I'm going to run to the store, can you watch the kids? And you're like, well, I'm kind of on the phone doing stuff, but you're not clocked in anywhere, and that can be tough. Another malfunction: we put distasteful activities off so long that serious problems arise. Okay, my favorite example of this is myself in the past paying my bills. I would put off paying my bills till the absolute last minute before I would start getting reports on my credit, and it did. It caused very serious problems, very expensive for me with late fees and things like that. But putting off distasteful activities. Sometimes you get overwhelmed with paperwork, overwhelmed with the learning curve. We talked about that a little bit with last week's training. We can get phone calls at all hours of the day and night. My favorite example of this was a friend of mine who's now a broker here at Equity, and his phone message used to be, hello, you've reached John Smith. That's not his real name. You've reached John Smith. My hours are, like, I think he said 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. or something like that, or 10 p.m., and it was just nuts. And I left him a message, but I remember hanging up specifically thinking, man, if that's really his hours, I seriously feel sorry for him. Anyways, phone calls at all hours of the day and night, that can really derail your train. And then just a general feeling of being overwhelmed. What I'm going to share with you today is a concept. Let me go back one page. A concept that will cure all of these problems. Okay? If you put it into practice and test drive this for 1 week with me, it will solve all of these problems that you're having. Okay? I call it the ideal week. What I want you to do is get a blank sheet of paper, and I want you to just brainstorm. In your ideal work week, not your ideal week on the beaches of Hawaii, but your ideal work week, what are the kind of things that need to happen for you to be totally productive, to get all the most important things done? What are all those tasks that need to occur? Just make a list. Okay, here's a very brief list. Prospecting should be at the top of everybody's list. In your ideal week with real estate, prospecting must be there for you to hit your goals to make your money that you need to make, right? So it may not be your very most favorite activity, but this is something that must happen. So I'm not talking about your favorite week again. This is your ideal work week. Prospecting. Following up on listings and files under contract, meeting with assistants, sales meetings, showings, client meetings, responding to phone calls, doing paperwork, studying, all of these kinds of things, attending the trainings on Thursday. If you're local here in Utah, joining us for our Friday group coaching sessions, all of those things I think would be important. So your ideal week, you've got the list. Take some time extra today or whenever you put this into practice. Hopefully you'll have some time and you can start on it right away so that by next week when you come to the training next week, you'll have some good things to share. So ideal week, make a big list of everything just on a blank sheet of paper. And then what you're going to do is you're going to pull out a blank calendar. Now I just went into Outlook and I went into an old calendar, so I picked, at the time I was using Top Producer, and so I used Outlook because it was all blank. I wasn't using that calendar, and so you can see how old this is. Now, my ideal week doesn't resemble this anymore, but this is what it was back then for me. And so I went in, I got a blank calendar, and I set my blank calendar next to this list. I'll go back a sheet, my ideal week list of all the things that I needed to accomplish, okay? And I started putting things in. Now, let me tell you, first of all, the results that I had with this, okay? I told you I was having 24 transactions and I was spending a lot of time, more time than I was happy with, away from my family. Basically, what brought me to do this was not quite an ultimatum, but there was a feeling that an ultimatum was in the coming, that I needed to spend more time with my family. And so I realized I was going to probably take a hit to my income, but I made the commitment that I was going to drop my work hours to no more than 50 hours a week, preferably 40 hours a week. Okay? And so I created this program specifically to get myself down around 40 hours a week. And regardless of the hit to my income, I was committed I was going to do this. The thing that shocked me is I put this into practice, and I actually increased my income by 50%. I went from 24 transactions to 35 transactions, and I did cut my hours by 50%. Okay, you're going to be amazed at the results when you put this into practice. So first of all, what I did here is I figured for myself, well, one of the main things that needs to happen that's just driving my wife crazy is I'm taking phone calls at all hours, you know, and that needs to change. There needs to be some sanity time. And so I decided I'm not going to take phone calls all day long, all night long. I'm going to just, there's a certain point where I'm going to just cut it off, okay? And I said that's going to be 6 p.m. on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Tuesdays and Thursdays I'll keep open for working evenings because it's a required part of our job. But I'm going to quit answering the phone certain days, okay? Therefore, my first task in the morning, I need to check my phone messages and emails, and this is all cut off for you guys. You can't see it, but that's what it was. I was going to check messages, okay? For the next hour, I was going to return calls and emails. I honestly don't remember what I did from 10:30 to 11. Then I did prospecting. My ideal week gave me an hour and a half for lunch. It ended up being a half hour, but a guy can dream. I did trainings on a daily basis back then. I also studied every day for an hour. And then I would, in the evening, when clients started getting home or getting off of work, I made that my client follow-up time and setting appointments so that I could keep my Tuesdays, Thursdays, and I also kept Saturdays open. I didn't schedule anything on Saturdays, but I did keep it open for showing appointments, and I committed to not work on Sundays. So this was basically what I did. I took my ideal week list, everything that I needed that was important, and I put it in here. Now what I would encourage you guys to do is in your ideal week list include personal items as well, family time, okay, church time, service activities, that kind of stuff, all right? Everything that is important to you in your life, put it down in your list and then book it. Now, Stephen Covey has a book out called First Things First, and I think it's a fantastic book. And it talks about this same concept of prioritizing your life. We're all busy. We've all got so many great things to do. And oftentimes, the biggest enemy of great is good, right? And so we're filling our life with good, they're decent activities, but they're certainly not the best things that we could be doing with our time. So when you make this list, you've got all your priorities, you've got the big things. And Stephen Covey in his book, he talks about, if you can imagine this, a jar, and you've got some rocks that need to put in it, you've got, and those are your big priorities, the rocks, those are the big things. And then you've got some pebbles, which are fairly important, then you've got sand, which is like watching your favorite TV show that night, and then maybe, well, maybe the sand's more important than that, and then there's water as well, all right? So basically different priorities, 4 different levels of priorities. He said with a lot of people, what they do is they'll fill their jar up with sand, with these fairly unimportant things, and then they notice that they have no time left for family, and that big rock just won't fit in there anymore. But if you put in the big rocks first, then you can put in a few pebbles, and it'll filter down around in the gaps. You can still pour in some sand, and that'll filter around. And then you can still pour in some water, and so you can fit a little bit of everything. Basically, you can have a pretty balanced life as long as those big rocks get put in first. So that's what you're going to do with this blank calendar. And again, you're just printing out 1 week. This is going to be kind of your guideline for you that you're going to try to go by. So you've got your list of all these activities, including personal activities, that would give you your ideal week, okay? Then you take it, fill in all the gaps with your blank calendar. Now, another term for this in the industry is called time blocking. All right, so you'll notice that if I am doing my return calls and emails, or my where's a better example? Okay, if I'm studying here, right? It can really interrupt my studying if I hear my computer beep and oh, there's an email, and so I jump on and get distracted. And that happens a lot with people. We get distracted. People talk about this idea of multitasking, and it's a farce if you actually get in and study it. People do not multitask. What they do is they get really good at switching back and forth from one task to another very quickly, but they're not truly multitasking. They're focusing very briefly on different tasks. That actually lowers your productivity. So people that brag about how well they multitask typically don't accomplish as much. So what you need to do is increase your focus on certain tasks. So for example, paperwork. My desk is getting overwhelmed with paperwork. This I need to focus on. I need to not, when my computer bings, I need to not jump on it and see what the latest email is. When I get a little blip on my iPad showing that somebody has updated their Facebook status, I need to not scramble and grab that. Even when my phone rings, I need to not drop everything and pick that up like I'm some trained Pavlovian dog. All right? What I need to do is focus on my paperwork, get my desk clean. That's going to give me a lot of peace of mind. It's going to make sure that my bills are paid on time so that I don't incur late fees. It's going to get my files turned in, my paperwork done correctly, my contracts reviewed so that I know I'm not missing important signatures or deadlines or things like that. All of this stuff is very important to my business, and yet it doesn't get done because of the myriad of distractions out there that basically steal my time from me. And now it's not stealing my time. My time is there just like it is for everybody, but what it is it's making me less in charge of my time. I'm not managing myself very well. So how did I put this into practice? Because some of you are probably out there thinking, I know I did, how are my clients ever going to accept that I'm not going to answer their phone calls after 6 p.m.? That's just crazy. They're used to me answering at 10 p.m. at night. Some of them are calling me, and it just makes me want to cry. And I'm not happy about it, and I can't disguise my voice that I'm thrilled that they're calling me at 10 o'clock at night with some stupid question. How do I make this change? I'm going to lose all my clients. And I was prepared to do that because it was for my family. I would rather lose my clients than my family. And I was surprised by this as well. What I did is I went to my clients, and every time I met with a buyer or a seller, I said, oh, and by the way, here's my schedule. Monday nights, I take off for family night. Friday nights is a date night with my wife. And Tuesday and Thursday, I go on showing appointments as well as Saturdays with clients. That basically leaves my wife alone with the kids all the time. So Wednesday night is her night off, and I'm home with the kids Wednesday. That gives you, as my new buyer client, Tuesday nights, Thursday nights, and Saturdays for showings. That's usually more than enough time for most buyers to get out and feel like they're getting plenty of attention. Does that work for you? And in every case, they said, absolutely. That works for me. I said, okay, fantastic. If you do call me, feel free to call me anytime, okay? If it's after 6 o'clock, I just won't answer. However, I'll return your call, messages, or whatever, very first thing the very next morning, okay? And they're like, okay, yeah, that sounds fine. So basically, I reviewed my ideal week with my clients. Every single one of them said, all right, that sounds great. Very rarely would I need to make an exception, which I would if I had to with a client. I would make an exception if they worked Tuesdays and Thursday nights, then okay, I'll make some adjustments and I'll go out on another evening with you. But most of the time, my clients would fit my schedule. And not only were they fine doing so, I actually, in my closing surveys that I sent out to my clients, I actually got higher marks that year than I ever had the previous year when I was taking calls at 10 o'clock at night. And I thought about that for a while, and I think that the reason was that when I took a call at 10 o'clock at night, I sounded upset. I couldn't disguise that in my voice. They felt like they were bothering me, because they were, and I couldn't disguise it. Now, when they called me and I called them back, I stuck to my guns. I lived my schedule. I was happy to do so. They noticed a difference in me. It was exactly what they expected, because I set their expectations right up front. I lived up to all their expectations, and I was happy about it. So actually my client satisfaction went up, even though I was working less hours. It was phenomenal how that played out for me. I was fascinated by that. Another thing that I thought interesting about this was how it worked with my family. I went to my family and I showed them, this is my ideal week. And as long as I was true to when I was going to be off, if I really was home by 6 and I spent great quality time with my family several nights a week, then they were much more prone to respect my 9 to 6 working hours. They didn't barge in on me. They didn't ask me to run errands for them. I wasn't constantly doing shopping trips or babysitting. My time was much more respected by my own family. In other words, all of a sudden, I'm getting treated like a professional, both by my family and by my clients. And they're both happier about it. And I'm working less hours, and I increase my income by 50%. So how do you become a professional? Act your part. How many, let me go back one page again, back to this little schedule. I know you've been staring at this for a while, but let's say, well, I'll share a story. I used to manage at Walmart, and if you don't know Walmart, they're all managed from, all the stores are managed remotely from Bentonville, Arkansas. So I managed the Park City store. I was an assistant store manager there. And in Park City, of course, it's a resort town, a lot of snow, very cold weather sometimes. And if it got too cold in the store and we wanted to change the temperature, we had to call Bentonville, Arkansas to change the temperature in our store. So basically, they are extremely good at knowing the details of what goes on in their store, because if you're heating up a store that big, it can get very expensive. And they manage things very tightly. Also, if the doors opened a little bit late, the manager that was supposed to be there and have them opened on time, he wasn't tricking anybody. Okay, there were all sorts of reports that went out that those doors had been opened late. In other words, the manager would lose his job. Okay, and it didn't matter what kind of salary you were at. If the store didn't get opened on time, or if it closed early, people knew about it, and the manager's job would be on the line. That is what it takes for a company to become the largest retailer in the world. They act extremely professional. They have a sign on their doors saying we're open at 9 a.m. or whatever it is. Then, by gum, they're open at 9 a.m. or people lose their jobs. What about you? Are you that professional? Do you want people to treat you professionally? Do you want to make an income comparable to a doctor's or a lawyer's? Well, doctors and lawyers make those sacrifices. Doctors are on call sometimes 24/7, right? They make the sacrifices. They went to 12 extra years of school. They live their walk, and if they don't, then they don't get hired. I mean, there's a lot of starving lawyers out there that can't manage their businesses. They go out of business. Just because they've got a degree doesn't give them anything. They have to act the professional, and so do you. And so you can imagine how upset you would be if your bank was supposed to be open and they weren't. You'd probably move your money into a different bank because you wanted to go there at a certain hour and get your banking done, and they're not there. So you leave after one instance. How does that compare to your professional life in real estate? Are you a professional, or can you use this training today to sharpen that up? And honestly, most of us, even myself, every time I give this training, I see all sorts of flaws and weaknesses that have crept back into my schedule, and I'm like, oh man, I've got some improving to do. Hopefully this gives you guys the same thing, and you can find ways to improve. So use this blank calendar. Block your time out. Get the important things in here. Don't be a hostage to everybody else's expectations of you. If somebody calls you and says, hey, we just found a great house, and it's Monday at 3 o'clock or whatever. We just found a great house. Wonder if you could run out and show it to us. Well, my first goal is going to be to see if they can fit this time slot down here. I'll say, actually, that's great. I'll make some calls and see if it's available. Typically, they require 24 hours notice for showings. Is it possible for us to go tomorrow night? And most of the time, my clients will say, sure, it is. Sometimes they'll say, oh, no, man, this one's going to go fast. This is a hot deal. This is a scream deal. And sometimes I'll make an exception. But I'm going to try first to get them to fit my schedule. And most of the time, I'm going to be successful. All right? So, 3-step process to becoming a master of time management, or rather self-management. First of all, set goals. You can't manage yourself if you don't know where you're going. We've talked about this in the past few weeks. Hopefully you guys have done so. Hopefully you've run your goals past that SMART acronym: specific, measurable, action-oriented, realistic, and time-sensitive. Always know where you're heading and have a motive that will keep you on track. Second, plan every day, week, and month in advance. We've talked about this as well. Now that you've got this time blocking skill with your ideal week and that calendar out there, it makes your planning easier because you've got time slots to fit everything into. I need to make calls today. Well, that's great. I've got a time slot every day for 1 hour that I focus on making calls. I don't get distracted with Facebook. I don't get distracted with YouTube. I don't get distracted with running errands. This is my time I make my calls. So all these people that I'm going to call, I'm going to fit that into 1 hour's time. I'm going to get my job done. All right? Planning every day, week, and month in advance works like a dream when you're using that ideal week plan. Okay? And third, and this is very elusive for people, take time at the end of every day to evaluate yourself. Measure your progress. Make minor adjustments. That ideal week that I told you doesn't even closely resemble my ideal week today, okay? Because my life changes. You're going to notice, if you will do this test with me this week, if you'll do your ideal week for 1 week, you're going to notice that your life has changed so much that you're going to need to rework that ideal week, okay? You'll get to a point where it will stick with you for a lot longer, but you'll sit there and you'll say, like, for example, me, and I gave you the example how bad I was at paying my bills. My ideal week consisted of, well, I've got to learn accounting software. I need to know what I'm doing. I'm going to need to schedule 2 hours every Monday for bills. I got to get on top of this. I'm paying out so much money a month in late fees. I can't do this anymore. I'm going to schedule 2 hours every Monday. Well, that's gotten down to about 30 minutes a month, okay, because that's gone. Man, I've got all these stacks of papers on my desk. I'm going to do a paperwork for an hour a day. Well, after 4 days of that, I don't have any paperwork left on my desk. Everything's caught up. So I'm going to need to adjust my ideal week back to maybe 15 minutes a day, something like that. So evaluate your progress. Make minor adjustments. Tweak that ideal week, but keep it. Keep that ideal week in there, okay? Find what are the ideal activities for you. Put it into practice, and you will be absolutely shocked at what you'll accomplish in a week. And if you'll do this for a year, you won't recognize your business. Okay? I'll make that guarantee for you. You do this for a year, you won't recognize your business about how dramatic it can change. Here's your homework. You make your ideal week list. Again, that was a list of all the activities that are priorities for you. Put that into your calendar guide. That's your blank calendar that you're going to lay out and just time block everything. 15 minutes every morning to plan. Have an objective in mind with your goals in front of you. Have solid, achievable steps toward that objective, and then plan 15 minutes at the end of each day to record in your journal what you did to achieve your objective and the #1 area that you can improve on. Folks, if you can do this, you're going to have a great experience. I would love for you to email me that experience at eric.lee@equityutah.com. I always get some requests for people to take notes or to send me copies of this. What I'm doing is I'm recording all of these to YouTube. If my YouTube channel is just Elite Agent Training, it's all one word. Hopefully you'll be able to find it, but you can go there and you can actually subscribe to that channel on YouTube so that every time I post a new video, it's available for you to go there and see. I've got a few questions typed in here. Oh, I think somebody requested that I back up a slide. Okay, back to the homework. So anyways, if you have any questions or if you do put this into practice, I would love to hear how it works for you. Please send me a testimonial to eric.lee@equityutah.com. Again, thank you so much for joining me today, and I will see you online next week. Bye-bye.